Carter, I'm going to give you the right introduction.
All right.
I'm Stephen Carter. I'm host for Black Star Still Rising, sponsored by Black Star Project and the Executive Director, Gloria Smith, and in the memory of the founder of the Black Star Project, Philip Jackson. Welcoming our audiences here today, and you're going to be having an exciting program. I have a guest. I could take 15 minutes probably just to introduce him and his background and credentials. I won't take all that time. I'm going to do a little early shout outs, especially to Imani Payne, who is our studio producer and studio engineer. Imani, thank you for doing such a great job in getting us ready for this, and we're going to continue on. I have to shout out to one of our supporters, and that's Lisa Dawn Taylor, the founder, editor of South Shore Current Magazine's, West Side Current Magazine, and the West of the Riot Magazine. Also shout out to one of our supporters, and that is Cy Lewis. She is Sharon Cy Lewis. She is the executive director of the Meadows East Side Project. So you got a little bit of I've got to tell you a couple of things first before we start the interview. Black Star is hosting an event, and you get your pencils and papers handy for this, is the Bronzeville Fall Festival. It's going to be September 28th, October 28th, from 1 to 4. And it's going to be at 35th and Philip Jackson Drive, 35th and Philip Jackson Drive. I want to keep that in mind. I want you to know that our mission here is to be the champion of centenarians, and I want you to raise your hand, any centenarians in the office, raise your hand so I can see and we can see it. It's for octogenarians like me. I'm 3 years into the club of octogenarians, septuagenarians, and sexagenarians. That's folks in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s who this program is to take them from can't see to can see. It used to be opposite in slavery days. They would work from can't see to can see. And now we want our folks, our elders, and I say elders, I don't say elderly, I say elders. That's who this program is for, so they can celebrate and we can celebrate their wisdom, their honor, their nobility. On that note, I'm going to welcome here today Dr. Ronald Elton. Now, I should say this now, I'm giving him his full name, but like Dr. Oz, before this season is over, you're going to be able to refer to him as Dr. Ron, and everybody will know who you're talking about, Ron, Dr. Ron. I'll tell you this background. He ain't no punk.
That's fine.
He's been a CPD for 17 years.
Yeah.
He's a Vietnam veteran of combat. Vietnam veteran of combat. He has been a commissioner with the city of Chicago. He has such outstanding credentials. He has 3 masters, a doctorate, so you know he ain't playing around in terms of educating himself, preparing himself for this journey that he's going to take us through, and especially our seniors. Dr. Ron.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being with me today.
It's my pleasure.
And he made this kind of last minute thing. This is going to be a program that's based upon questions. There's a poet, E. Cummings, that says, "To him the beautiful question, who asked the more beautiful answer." The beautiful answer to him who asked the more beautiful question. So we're going to be asking some beautiful questions, and guess who's going to be providing the beautiful answers? Dr. Ron.
I'll do my best, Steve.
I know you're going to, I gave you that introduction, you can't fail. I was present at a couple of presentations of Dr. Ron this past week, past 2 weeks, at the what's the name? Atlas
Community Center.
Community Center on 79th Radical Gear. Most impressed. One of the most impressive things was the men, the black men and black women that came out, and the black men were so expressive and open because he brought out things, he asked questions that elicited responses that they've been holding back on. And one of the questions that came out and you brought up was what drives emotions and feelings. How would you answer that?
Well, emotions, our feelings, and our thoughts aggravate whatever that emotion is. Emotions are a part of our DNA. We can't get away from it. But emotions don't necessarily have to be negative. They can be positive. But anything that's obsessive in terms of your emotion is an issue, and it should be discussed in a way that you can kind of map out a timeline as to what's causing the emotion, label the emotion, and then we find some result or resolve to that emotion.
You also asked the beautiful question, what am I anxious about? And there were some questions about that. Dr. Ron, tell us a little bit about that particular thing and tell us about your experience. Like being on a program like this, even as experienced as you are, sometimes you get anxious.
Well, getting here in all this traffic was anxious for me. Clinically, ladies and gentlemen, I've been diagnosed with acute anxiety. And a lot of that stems from my time spent in Vietnam. And from that war, I came back whole physically, but I was splintered and tarnished psychologically. But fortunately for me, I was able to get a job when I got back. And that kept me busy. I started with the police department at the police academy in
17 years.
1973.
Tell a little bit about that quick back.
Well, in 1973, there weren't a lot of black jobs available for black men. One was CTA.
Yep.
The other was Chicago Police Department. And the other one was the post office.
I did that.
Okay.
2 out of 3.
Didn't want any part of those other two except the police department, because that gave me an opportunity not only to carry a weapon, because that's all I knew at the time, was trying to protect myself and trying to survive during that whole process. But aside from being a policeman and being able to carry a weapon, it generated respect from people. Now we don't have that now. These kids don't respect the police department, and oftentimes you fall into problems where you lose your way. You don't have anybody to talk to. You don't trust anybody. So you move back from a situation that could be very challenging for you, but yet and still you try to find a way where you can take step by step into what you need to do with your life. And that's very difficult to do by yourself. So,
and you also brought up, and I want you to address this too, that it seems to be more difficult for black men. Is that your experience, your observation?
That's been my experience, not only my experience, but being black myself. There wasn't anybody that I could really talk to, especially after I got back from Vietnam. We didn't have any debriefing. There was nobody I could really call up on the phone and talk to about my experience, because more times than not, they weren't where I had been, which was Vietnam. I very seldom ran into a Vietnam veteran. But here's the thing about a Vietnam veteran, or any war veteran, they don't talk about it.
Yes, yes.
They keep it to themselves.
Yes, yes.
And a lot of the reasons for that is, if they start to talk about it, the first thing will come out of somebody's mouth is, well, how many people did you kill? And that's really a shutdown for us. You know,
who would want to talk about that?
Who really wants to reawaken those horrors and all those struggles during that period of time?
And the reaction of Americans to veterans at the time. That was a terrible thing to come home and experience that. Yes.
Yeah, it was deplorable.
Yes.
I mean, when I came out of California and I was walking through the airport, and we were actually spat upon. We were called baby killers.
My goodness.
And that traumatized us even more because, we come from a hostile environment into a hostile environment that's supposed to be our home, and that wasn't there.
They had to be reticent about who you talk to, who you can trust, etc.
Exactly, yeah. So that was a bad feeling, bad experience. But it rounded me, Stephen. It compelled me to do what I wanted to do even before I went into the service. You know, I wanted to play football. I mean, and that's not unusual with black men. I mean, athletically, you know, we're inclined and we have that kind of prowess, you know, to be good athletes.
Mm-hmm.
But I lost that opportunity because I allowed my second gut feeling to oversee what I really wanted to do, and I missed out on that opportunity. And in 1968, that's when I got drafted. So.
And you got drafted, and just before that, I joined the National Guard and did more riot duty than I
Yeah.
did anything else.
Yeah, I got it. I understand.
But you know, you bring up one of the answers.
Yeah.
We asked a beautiful question, some of the things. One of the beautiful answers is, how do I fix it? How do I begin to fix it, approach it, address it?
Mm-hmm. Well, not until the Obama administration was I able to, along with a lot of other veterans, were able to get into the VA and get into a program where we got our therapy.
Okay. How effective was it then in the early stages?
It was very effective because
Okay.
I was open to it.
Okay.
I was receptive. I was looking for answers. And when you're looking for answers, you have to open up and be honest about your feelings. So
that's a part of fixing it too.
That's
Okay.
a part of fixing
Go ahead,
it.
please.
You have to admit that you do have a
Okay.
problem.
Okay.
So the psychologist I had at the time, he and I were sitting down talking one day, and he said, "Ron, what is the biggest thing that's bothering you at this particular time?"
Mm-hmm.
I said, "The biggest thing that's bothering me now is my feeling of guilt."
Okay.
So he said, "Well, can you explain that a little further? What were you guilty about?" I said, "I felt guilty because so many of my friends died in Vietnam, and I was spared." His answer for me was, "Ron, you have to understand that you didn't kill them. You weren't responsible for their deaths. They were in a situation just like you were, and you were fortunate enough, you were blessed enough
Yes.
to come out of that hole and to sit here and talk to me about your problem."
We've got vets from the center that are watching today.
Okay.
Raise your hand. How many of you felt that guilt? Just raise your hands. We'll know that you're out there. And you promised to watch tonight, and Dr. Ron is going to talk about some more about these issues and how to fix it.
Right.
And we gave you another chance after a good session this past Monday, and now we're going to follow up on that. And I bet we're going to have an episode 2 of this. Go ahead.
Okay. So once I was able to go through that therapy session, discussing that particular issue,
Yes.
which was an emotion, it was highlighted, it was underscored, it followed me for over 45 years. I was feeling that guilt. And I was tired of feeling that way, Steve. I wanted some answers. I wanted to do something. You know, I wanted to bring something to the table in the event that I had to address it with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not exposed to something, you don't have any experience with it, where's your guideline?
Mm-hmm.
Where's the template that you can focus on to make these conversations a part of who you are and your experience and your exposure?
Listen, our viewers, I'm hoping you're taking notes. Please take some notes. Raise your hand. Go take some notes. You know, that brings another thing that you brought up that was an intriguing question is, what does it mean that memory can be your worst enemy? I found that an intriguing question.
Our memories are our worst enemy. If you can't get beyond your past, what's the promise or where's the promise for your future? You're too focused on what was as opposed to focusing on what is or what could be. And that's my message when I do workshops, or when I'm visiting, or I have clients who come in and talk to me about their issues. And that's the first thing that comes out of my mouth. Well, what's bothering you? You know, well, I'm angry. Okay, well, why are you angry? Well, I really don't know. Well, let's start there. Let's identify why you're angry. So there are caveats to anger. Either you're lonely, either you feel guilty, you may be overwhelmed, you may be misunderstood. There are a lot of avenues that go into being angry. Once you identify what that is, now we can move to resolve it, because now we have labeled it. We know what it is. Okay, so what can we do next to fix it?
Okay.
So labeling the emotion, giving source to emotion. Everything has a beginning, Steve. Everything has a beginning.
I mean, how far back do those beginnings go?
It could go back as far as your childhood.
That long?
As far as
Raise your
childhood.
hand if
As
you got
far
some
as your
memories
childhood.
that go back that have
Yeah.
caused trauma and are still causing trauma. Go
Yeah.
back in, Dr. Ron.
So, going back to your childhood, and I had several problems that I dealt with as a young boy, 12, 13 years old. My mother and father divorced, and I felt that I was responsible.
Raise your hand, anybody? I see you. See you. Go ahead.
I didn't feel I was good enough. I didn't feel I had value. So those things I carry with me for a very, very long time. But my mother was a major proponent to not allowing that to validate who I was as a person. And that's what I carried with me for the rest of my life.
And I'm going to have you piggyback on this. The value of yourself, because I want our people 90, 80, 70, 60 years old to understand the value that they bring to our community that may be held back. And you might have some thoughts about that too, how they can express and share what they have to offer the community. But go ahead, Dr. Ron.
Well, what I try to do in my workshops, in the last workshop I had, Stephen was there. And in fact, he was there the one before that. So it was part 1 and part 2. But I try to get in the heads of people without bringing disrespect to them. It's better for you to tell me what your problem is than for me to sit down here and think that I'm some kind of magician and I can read your mind, that I know what's going on, because I don't. But if you tell me, you have to claim it. If you tell me, you have to talk about it. And once we talk about it, once we create that dialogue, now we've got a conversation that lends itself to a discussion, and that will follow a way to deal with those issues.
And that dialogue that you're talking about is part of what our programs will be over the next 12 weeks. A way to engage. And there are going to be 2 ways today to engage. One, you're going to be able to send your questions in to and for Dr. Ron at the number and the email address below, silverseniorschampion@gmail.com. That comes directly to me. Now, Dr. Ron, you're going to tell us your either email or your website where folks can get more, and I'm going to have you repeat it a couple of times.
Sure, no
Go
problem.
ahead.
Okay, the email, ladies and gentlemen, is Ronald, R-O-N-A-L-D. My last name, A-L-S like Sam, T like Tom, O, N as in Nora. The number 708@gmail.com.
Now, there was a lady back there who wasn't writing fast enough. Okay, can you repeat that again for that lady who doesn't write fast?
Okay.
Give it to us slow.
All right. First name, Ronald, R-O-N-A-L-D. Last name, Alston or Alston, whatever's easier for you. A-L, S like Sam, T like Tom, O, N as in Nora. The numbers, 708@gmail.com.
And we're sponsored here today by Black Star Project. The program is Black Star Still Rising. And to reach me and to send the email address, so we'll have these questions in the future, is silverschampion06@gmail.com. I'll spell that out for you. SILVERSENIORS champion 06@gmail.com. You'll see it at the bottom of your screen. I might have messed it up. But anyway, let's broach another question. And something that you mentioned that you said, and I thought about this for a while. You said human mind thrives on what we feed it. Tell me about that. How does our human mind thrive on what we feed it?
The human mind is a very complex thing, but it does not discriminate. It does not have bias. What you feed your mind automatically goes into your subconscious mind.
Okay.
And the two exchanges of the human mind is your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. Your conscious mind is an exchange of conversation like we're having now, Stephen.
Yes.
That's very positive. It's very uplifting. These are things that we want to do. But anything that negative that you store into your subconscious mind, if it's not being replaced by something positive, that's what you're going to focus on. That's what you're going to go to every time you get into a situation that's compromising. So you have to really understand and be careful with what your beliefs are, what your habits are, what your mindset is at the time, what you're dealing with, what you would like to get away from, but you need to find out what the roadmap is to get to that point. And when I do workshops, I try to be very detailed about what I do. Nothing is really stretched on academics.
Yes.
It's just real life situations where I'm dealing with real life people who are just like me.
And you're an academician that could bring it down home.
Bring it down home, right.
But you had another interesting thing too.
Yeah.
And I want a show of hands on this. What challenges have you not addressed? I'm going to repeat that. What challenges you have not addressed? Raise your hands back there in the audience. Okay.
Okay.
What can you respond to that? Because I thought that was the interesting thing.
Well, there are there are challenges that a lot of us have not talked about, because again,
What's typical?
what's typical?
Some of the stories that you've had about that. Yes.
Well, the background: not having a relationship with your father, not having a relationship with your mother. Your father or your mother may be addicted to some kind of chemical, alcohol or drugs. Just not being able to sit down at a table, having dinner, and have a serious discussion about your day. Or somebody not asking you, well, Ron, how was your day today? What happened at school? What happened after school? How are you getting along with your friends? What's going on in your life? What are your goals? What are you looking forward to?
You also
in
said
your
that that's, let me add this quick one. You say it's compounded by age.
It is compounded by age, because if we spend 50, 60, 70 years in the stable with a horse who's now gotten old, there are no tricks to learn.
No new tricks with the pony.
There are no new tricks, you know. So you got to come out of that stable. You got to come out of your shell. You got to sit down and talk with somebody and have serious dialogue about where you are in your life and where you need to be in your life.
I got some bullet points because we only have about 3 minutes, and I
Okay.
want to get as much in. But there's going to be a part two. The next point I wanted to make is, how do I fix a depression in 20 words or less?
Well, you fix the depression, first of all, by identifying what the depression is, who caused the depression, what did cause the depression, and sit down and say, okay, well, how, can I figure this out by myself? Well, maybe not. Maybe you need a Dr. Ron to come in and sit down with you and discuss why you're depressed.
I'm going to tease the audience with this one. What is your definition of intergenerational inheritance of ignorance?
A lot of who we are, a lot of what we have become, comes from our parents, comes from our grandparents. Our parents got it from our grandparents. So those are generations that we're talking about. My father told me something interesting. We were having a conversation about diet and food. And he said a lot of black people are diabetics because of what we were forced to eat.
Well, we were forced to eat.
What we were forced to eat.
Okay.
You know, we got the scraps
Uh-huh.
of what our white predecessors had.
Yes, yes.
That's how we, chitlins is one.
And I still like my chicken.
Yeah.
I ain't going to be lying.
And
I
a
still
lot
like
of
it.
black people like their chitlins. But that's a lot of the reasons why we have these health issues. That's generational. So not only our eating is generational, how we choose to act, how we choose to talk, what our likes and dislikes are, those come from generations of handed down information that sometimes was right at the time, but as time moves on, every belief, every habit becomes dated.
And while we have a few minutes, not a few minutes, but a few seconds left, please give them the email address for you, so if they want to send something to you. Give it to them now, because we've got about 30 seconds left, or less.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
First and last name, Ronald Alston, or Ronald Alston, ALSTON, the numbers 708 at gmail.com.
And this is Black Star, still rising. Welcome, Dr. Ron. You were one of the first to be able to call him Dr. Ron. It's going to be as famous as Dr. Oz.
All right.
Thank you very much, my brother.
My pleasure.
All righty.
My pleasure.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
you.